Humans are wired to love stories. And what we love most about stories is the hero. Remember back in the day when playing outside until the street lights came on was cool? Yeah, back then. Who did you imagine yourself being? I promise you never imagined you were Clark Kent. Don't even tell that lie. You know you wanted to be Superman, Supergirl, the Incredible Hulk, a Power Ranger. You wanted to be the one that saved the day. And no matter how big the enemy or how great the obstacle, you still wanted to be the hero. Because more than a good hero story, what we connect to is the hero's journey. We love to see them rise and fall and win. We need to see them win so that when we look at our own life and we see our own trauma, we know we can win too. And for that reason, I want to share with you some of my findings on the connection trauma narrative has with becoming a real life hero and how it's inspired the way that I live my life, love my family, and serve others. As a publishing consultant, I get to help people tell their stories. And one of the greatest parts of that process is watching authors go from victim to hero when sometimes they don't even know it. Now, I have to be honest, my favorite and one of my favorite heroes to work with is my autistic son. I remember a few years back, he was ready to make friends. And anyone who knows anything about autistic children knows that when they set their mind to do something, you can believe it's going to get done. So naturally, he turned to social media to accomplish this, and he connected with a friend from school. She invited another friend of hers, and all three of them went live. And let me tell you, he did great. He did everything he learned how to do in his speech classes, and I watched proudly from the background, eavesdropping, because you know I was all up in it. He asked the young ladies, "What are you up to? How's your day going?" And in response, they laughed at him. A flood of comments came in, and soon after that, people said, "He must be slow. What's wrong with him?" and so forth. As I watched from the other room in horror, my heart broke and my blood boiled. I wanted nothing more than to be a hero for him in this moment, and so I did what any mom would do. I called him into the other room just so that he could get off the live. "Yes, Mom," he said. I told him, "Listen, son, you don't have to take such nonsense." He said, "But Mom, my friend stuck up for me." And it was true. The girl that he knew told the other girl not to poke fun at him, all while she snickered. But I saw that he needed this to be the truth, and so I told him, "Yes, you are correct, but I need you to know that when people are mean, you can walk away." And he said, "But Mom, look, no tears," and ran off to play with his Legos. What's interesting about this moment is that my son chose the path of hero for this traumatic event. In a subconscious instant, he was able to create a narrative that told his mind everything was fine. Meanwhile, I'm trying to find these young ladies' parents' contact information so I can give them all a very non-hero piece of my mind. But that's when I began to wonder, how could he process this trauma so quickly? I was supposed to be the adult, the hero in the situation, yet he was able to transform this narrative into something different. And so it got me to wonder, what if the speed of our trauma recovery is getting lost in the translation of us being able to adopt a hero narrative instead of focusing on the traumatic event as a narrative? And so over the next few years, I began to look at whether trauma in trauma narrative processing happens faster or might happen faster using a hero narrative technique. Now, there's a couple problems with this. The first one is that we don't process trauma that quickly. We're not wired that way. When trauma hits our body, two things happen. The first thing is what I call rush and snap. It's when adrenaline rushes through the body and snaps a picture of the trauma. That's why, more than likely and more often than not, it's hard to forget the trauma. The second thing that happens is disconnect. Our body disconnects from our mind because the emotional side of our brain has taken over the cognitive processing side of the brain, and we can't tell if we're going crazy or what we need to do to be able to step out of said trauma. Trauma actually shows up in our life in a daily pattern more often than we realize, because trauma, by definition, is only a heightened, constant state of emotion running wildly through the body. So when we look at trauma from that lens, we can see it show up in, let me give you an example, overworking, overachieving, overcommitting. That can be a form of trauma. Another way it shows up in our daily life is nightmares. When you have a nightmare that feels so real, when you wake up, you still feel it, and you feel like you need to disconnect from people, places, and things. Now, I live with all men. And some might say that's trauma in and of itself, for the simple fact that you have to constantly remind people to put the toilet seat down. But I digress and recall a family movie night. And during this family movie night, we watched a movie called X-Men: Days of Future Past. And in this movie, there's a scene that totally moved me. In this particular scene, Professor X is talking to his former self, Charles, and he's giving him a pep talk on how he, with the help of the X-Men, can defeat and stop Magneto from assassinating the president. Now, what's powerful about this moment is that Professor X is not talking to himself as if he's himself. He's talking to himself and speaking to the hero inside of him. And when he changed that narrative, then Charles, later Professor X, becomes a hero. I continue to examine and do research on what trauma looks like in processing and came across 4 different studies. And in those 4 different studies, they used adults and adolescent children, and they looked at the success of trauma narrative therapy. And in doing so, when it came to the success of trauma narrative therapy, they found 2 things. When language and character position was changed, it resulted in higher levels of cognitive processing of the traumatic event itself, less negative self-focus, and lower symptomatology of depression and anxiety and lack of concentration. So we can learn that activating the hero mode in our own life comes from the sum total of you being able to imagine yourself as a different character and use different language that creates a new story. Now, how do we create and get this new story going? Well, I have 4 ways that I want to share with you that might be helpful. The first way is to lean and pause. And what we're doing when we lean and pause is we're leaning into the emotion to actually feel it. And then we're pausing to stop and take a breath. And when you stop to take a breath, you're calming down the nerves, even the last one someone just plucked. And when you're calming down those nerves, it's allowing your body to then recalibrate so you can think about what is the next best step forward. The second thing we can do is to speak like a hero. And speaking like a hero is being positive and speaking positive to that moment. Even if all you can say is, I am a hero, I am a hero, I am a hero, in that heightened constant state of emotion. Much like when we say to ourselves, I feel sick, and then we actually feel sick, our body responds to the command that we give it. So if we speak like a hero, then our very body aligns with us becoming the hero we want to be. The third thing we can do is to act like a hero. Now, one thing I know about heroes is that they might not all wear capes, but they do play Legos. When you're looking to act like a hero, you may not play Legos, but you do want to find activities that align with you being a hero. Because guess what? Speaking it just might not be enough. Then the fourth thing that you can do is build a community. And when you're building a community, it is not surrounded by your strengths. That community is there to support your weaknesses. Because when you are feeling that flood of trauma and emotion in your body, you might not be able to speak. You might not be able to breathe. And so you need that community around you to help you get back on track. I know the moment that I watched my son navigate through this traumatic experience using a hero narrative, I knew that I saw something I'd never seen before. It was a superpower I'd never seen before. He was able to take the trauma and turn it into a narrative that was resilient, that was reconciled, and that was unashamed to be anything but hero. Oftentimes, we imagine a hero only being someone we see in one of our favorite stories or a favorite film. But maybe, just maybe, what we love about being a hero and what we love about seeing that hero is all of the ways that they reflect how we can show up as a hero in our own life. What if, maybe, just maybe, you are the missing hero in your story? And if that's so, I say, hero, suit up. Because what's a good story without a hero anyways? Thank you.